What happens when arrogance meets humility? 36,000 feet in the air. This story will make you rethink respect. Sir, that's my seat. The voice was calm, steady, and polite. It belonged to a man who looked like someone's grandfather. Soft gray hair, neatly trimmed beard, dressed in a brown cardigan and khaki pants. His name was Leonard Claiborne, and to everyone else on Flight 228 from Phoenix to Seattle, he just looked like an ordinary old man traveling alone. The younger man standing in front of him, Trevor Miles, couldn't have looked more different. Expensive watch, designer jacket, phone in hand, attitude written all over his face. He didn't even look up when he replied, "Yeah, no, I like the window seat. You can take the one over there." He pointed toward a seat 2 rows back. Middle seat, no legroom. Then he sat down like the conversation was over. A few passengers looked up. One woman frowned. The flight attendant, a woman in her late 30s named Carla, noticed the exchange and walked over. "Is everything all right here?" she asked. Leonard gave a small, patient smile. "It's fine, ma'am." "I think there's been some confusion. My boarding pass says 3A. Trevor let out a quick laugh. "Look, I was running late. The boarding agent already told me to just sit. It's one seat, man. Relax." Carla checked her tablet. "Sir," she said gently to Trevor, "your assigned seat is actually 5C. This one does belong to Mr. Claiborne." Trevor rolled his eyes. "Come on, you expect me to move now?" "We're about to take off. It's fine, he can stay back there. What's the big deal?" The air shifted. You could feel it. That strange tension when someone crosses a line but still thinks they're right. Mr. Claiborne didn't argue. He simply looked at Trevor for a moment, then back at Carla. "It's okay," he said quietly. "Let him stay." Carla hesitated. "Are you sure, sir?" Leonard nodded. "Yes, I'll manage." He turned to take the seat behind first class, still smiling faintly, as if nothing had happened. But to the people watching, it didn't sit right. Something about the calm in his voice, the quiet dignity in the way he handled the disrespect. It made Trevor look smaller, even though he didn't realize it yet. But little did Trevor know, the man he'd just dismissed wasn't just another passenger. He was the reason the plane existed at all. Most people in the airport that morning probably saw just another elderly man shuffling through security, taking his time, not in a rush for anything. But Leonard Claiborne had never been the kind of man to rush. Born in Mobile, Alabama in 1952, Leonard grew up in a world that rarely gave a young black boy a fair shot. His father worked at the docks, his mother cleaned offices at night, and Leonard learned early that respect wasn't something you demanded. It was something you earned quietly, over time. By 17, he was fixing broken radios for neighbors and saving every dollar he could. By 30, he'd built a small air freight company out of a single rented hangar and one second-hand plane. And by 65, that same business had grown into Claiborne Air, a regional airline known for treating its employees like family and its passengers like people, not numbers. But Leonard never flaunted it. He didn't care for the spotlight or the cameras. He preferred the background where the real work happened. He still checked flight logs, still showed up to maintenance meetings, and sometimes, like today, he just liked to sit in the cabin with everyone else to see how passengers were treated. He didn't tell anyone who he was, not even the flight crew most times. The only person who knew today was the captain, Ronald Bates, a man Leonard had hired years ago when other companies turned him down. As Leonard adjusted his seat in 5B, he looked out the window and smiled softly. The plane's wing gleamed under the morning light, and he thought about how far life had taken him, from a kid who couldn't afford a bus ticket to owning the very airline he used to dream of flying on. Carla passed by again, her face full of apology. "Sir, I'm really sorry about that earlier. I can speak to him again if you'd like." Leonard waved his hand lightly. "No need. You handled it just fine. Some lessons, they teach themselves." She smiled, though she didn't quite understand what he meant. But Trevor Miles wasn't done yet. His arrogance wasn't just about a seat. It was about something much deeper. And soon, the whole plane would see who he really was. Trevor Miles was 34, confident, loud, and convinced the world owed him comfort. He owned a digital marketing startup in Scottsdale, Arizona, and told anyone who would listen that he was crushing it. He wore success like a costume. The luxury watch, the custom sneakers, the expensive cologne that lingered even after he walked past. To strangers, he looked like a man who had it all figured out. But underneath all that flash was someone desperate to be seen. He grew up in a family that measured worth in status. His father, a salesman who never quite hit his big break, spent most of Trevor's childhood talking about how luck was the only thing separating him from millionaires. His mother worked long hours, saving and scraping, while Trevor dreamed of fast cars and first-class seats. So when life finally handed him a bit of success, a few big contracts, some money in the bank, he made sure everyone knew it. Flying first class wasn't just a comfort for him, it was proof that he wasn't ordinary anymore. When the old man had politely asked for his seat, something inside Trevor snapped. It wasn't really about the seat. It was about pride. He couldn't bear the idea of giving up something he believed he'd earned for someone who looked like they hadn't. Now, sitting smugly in 3A, Trevor reclined his chair, put in his wireless earbuds, and sighed dramatically. "Man, some people just need to chill," he muttered under his breath. The woman sitting next to him, a middle-aged traveler named Diana Porter, turned slightly and said, "You know, that wasn't right what you did back there." Trevor smirked. "Lady, it's a seat." "Don't make it deeper than it is." Diana shook her head. "It always is deeper than that." He rolled his eyes and turned up the volume on his earbuds. He didn't care what some random woman thought. As far as he was concerned, the situation was over. But the truth was, Trevor's arrogance had already started spreading through the cabin. People whispered. Heads turned. The quiet man he'd dismissed had left an impression, one that didn't fade so easily. But Trevor's attitude wouldn't just cost him respect. It was about to cost him something far more valuable. His pride in front of everyone. As the plane leveled out above the clouds, the tension from earlier still lingered in the air. Most passengers pretended to scroll through their phones or read magazines, but their eyes kept flicking toward row 3. Leonard Claiborne sat quietly behind Trevor, reading the same weathered paperback he'd carried on every flight for years. The Measure of a Man by Sidney Poitier. His glasses rested low on his nose, and every so often he'd glance toward the window, calm as ever. Trevor, on the other hand, was restless. He'd ordered a drink before the seatbelt sign even went off, and was now chatting loudly with the man beside him about how inefficient airlines were these days. "Half these companies don't even know how to treat their customers," Trevor said. "If I ran one, I'd fire half the staff and start over." The man beside him gave a polite smile but didn't respond. A few rows back, Carla, the flight attendant, quietly refilled coffee cups. When she approached Leonard again, she said softly, "Sir, I still feel awful about earlier." "I can speak to the captain if you'd like to move back to your original seat. The passenger might cooperate now." Leonard chuckled lightly. "No need. I've learned more about people by sitting right here than I ever could from the front row." Carla tilted her head, curious. "You seem very calm about it." He closed his book and looked at her. "Calm doesn't mean you don't notice. It just means you understand." Before she could reply, Trevor snapped his fingers. "Hey, miss, can I get another drink here? I've been waiting forever." The rudeness in his tone drew eyes again. Carla's smile stiffened. "Of course, sir." "I'll bring it right over." When she turned, Leonard looked at Trevor for a moment, not with anger, but with quiet disappointment. He'd seen that attitude before. Young men who confuse success with superiority. He used to be one of them once. As Carla handed Trevor his drink, turbulence rocked the cabin suddenly. The cup tipped, spilling whiskey down Trevor's expensive shirt. "Great. Just great," he barked. "Can someone on this plane do their job right?" Carla apologized quickly, offering napkins, but before she could clean up, Leonard stood and passed a fresh handkerchief forward. "Here," he said gently. "Use this. It's clean." Trevor hesitated, staring at the neatly folded white cloth. "No, I'm fine," he muttered, wiping himself with napkins instead. Leonard didn't argue. He simply nodded, folded his hands, and sat back down. But Diana, the woman beside Trevor, turned again. "You know, you could at least say thank you." "He's being kind." Trevor glared. "Mind your business." Diana gave a short laugh. "Someone needs to teach you some manners. Maybe life will do it for us." Her words hung in the air longer than he expected. Trevor turned back toward the window, pretending not to care, said yay, but the truth was, he felt something stir. Irritation? Maybe shame? He wasn't sure. But the flight wasn't even halfway over, and before it landed, Trevor's arrogance would meet the one truth he couldn't argue with: reality. The plane had settled again, the turbulence fading as sunlight streamed through the windows. Most passengers relaxed into quiet conversations or half-watched movies. But the atmosphere in first class still felt strange. like everyone was holding their breath, waiting for something. Leonard sat still, his eyes closed for a few minutes. The hum of the engines reminded him of the old hangar he used to work in back in Mobile, when he'd spend nights repairing parts with borrowed tools and more determination than money. Back then, respect wasn't something anyone gave him. He had to build it one act, one word, one flight at a time. Now, all these years later, he was watching a younger man burn through it in seconds. Trevor kept shifting in his seat, clearly irritated. The whiskey stain on his shirt had dried, but the embarrassment lingered. Every time a passenger glanced his way, he could feel it. That quiet judgment, that unspoken, "You went too far." Diana looked over once more, speaking softly. "You know, people remember how you treat them." Especially when you think no one's watching, Trevor huffed out a dry laugh. "Lady, it's not that deep." She smiled slightly. "Maybe that's the problem. For some of us, it's always been that deep." He didn't answer. He just stared out the window again, the clouds rolling beneath them like endless white waves. Somewhere inside, something small, pride, guilt, maybe both, started to twist. Leonard opened his book again, flipping to the same page he'd read a dozen times before. He wasn't angry. He'd seen worse. But there was something about this young man, the way he carried himself like the world owed him respect, without realizing how much of it he was losing by the minute. When Carla passed through again, Leonard stopped her with a gentle tone. "You're doing a fine job, you know. Don't let one bad moment ruin your day." Her smile softened. "Thank you, Mr. Claiborne, was it?" "Yes, ma'am," he smiled. "And please call me Leonard." As she walked away, Leonard glanced toward Trevor one more time. The young man was still scrolling on his phone, trying to look unbothered, but his shoulders told a different story. Tense, uneasy, defensive. But soon, Trevor would have no place to hide, because the next words over the intercom would change the entire flight, and everyone on board would finally learn who Leonard Claiborne really was. About an hour into the flight, the cabin lights dimmed slightly as the captain's voice came through the intercom. "Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. This is Captain Bates speaking. We're cruising at 36,000 feet and expecting clear skies all the way into Seattle. Before we begin our descent later, I'd like to take a brief moment to acknowledge someone special traveling with us today." Trevor didn't even look up. He was too busy typing on his phone, drafting an angry post about poor airline service. But a few passengers straightened in their seats, curious. The captain continued, his tone respectful but warm. "It's not every day that the man responsible for making these flights possible joins us on board. So, on behalf of the entire crew, I'd like to thank our founder, Mr. Leonard Claiborne, for flying with us this afternoon." A few passengers clapped politely, confused at first. Then suddenly, whispers spread like a breeze through the cabin. Heads turned. Every pair of eyes seemed to swing toward the quiet man in 5B. Leonard smiled, giving a small nod, his expression as humble as ever. But in row 3, Trevor froze. The words hit him like a slap. His head whipped around so fast that the woman next to him nearly spilled her drink. "What did he just say?" Trevor asked under his breath. Diana leaned closer. "He said the founder, as in the man who owns this airline." Trevor's stomach dropped. No way. That can't be him. But it was. The same man he'd brushed off. The same man whose seat he'd taken without a second thought. Carla, the flight attendant, approached Leonard with a beaming smile. "Mr. Claiborne, it's an honor, sir." "We didn't realize you'd be flying with us today." Leonard chuckled softly. "I like to see how things are running when no one's expecting me." Her eyes widened slightly, the kind of realization that spreads fast in a room. Within seconds, the whole front cabin seemed to understand what had happened. Trevor sank into his seat, his chest tightening. He could feel eyes on him, the quiet judgment now burning like fire. Diana didn't say a word, but her face said everything. Leonard didn't gloat. He didn't smirk or glance back in triumph. He simply closed his book, folded his hands, and said to Carla, "You've done a fine job today. Your kindness stands out." Trevor's throat went dry. Every instinct told him to apologize, to explain, but words failed him. He wasn't used to being the one in the wrong, and certainly not in front of an audience. When Leonard finally stood to stretch his legs, their eyes met for the first time since the confrontation. Leonard's expression was calm, not angry, not smug, just deeply human. Trevor whispered, "Sir, I didn't know." Leonard smiled faintly. "That's the thing about respect, son. You shouldn't need to know who someone is to give it." The words landed harder than any lecture could have, but the lesson wasn't over yet, because sometimes humility doesn't end with embarrassment. It begins with it. For the rest of the flight, Trevor Miles couldn't bring himself to say a word. He sat still, phone forgotten, hands clasped tightly together on his lap. His mind replayed everything he'd said. The arrogance, the tone, the dismissiveness. Every word that had sounded so justified an hour ago now echoed like nails scraping a chalkboard. Passengers still whispered, though not cruelly. It wasn't gossip anymore. It was quiet reflection. People glanced between Trevor and Leonard like they were watching a life lesson unfold in real time. Leonard had gone back to reading his book, as calm and unbothered as ever. But when Carla approached with a glass of water, she leaned in slightly. "You handled that with more grace than most people ever could," she whispered. Leonard smiled. "Anger's heavy, young lady. It costs more to carry it than to let it go." She nodded, eyes soft, before moving down the aisle. Trevor watched all of it. The respect, the warmth, the way people looked at Leonard with quiet admiration, and felt a deep pit forming in his stomach. For years, he'd thought success meant being loud about it, showing off, taking space, proving you were somebody. But Leonard Claiborne didn't need to prove anything. His presence alone spoke louder than any brand name ever could. After a while, Trevor stood and took a few hesitant steps down the aisle. He stopped by Leonard's row, his voice low. "Mr. Claiborne, may I sit for a moment?" Leonard looked up, meeting his eyes. "Of course." Trevor sat down, taking a breath. "I just wanted to say I was wrong. About a lot of things." Leonard didn't rush to fill the silence. He waited, letting Trevor's words find their weight. "I thought success meant showing people you're above them," Trevor continued, "but I see now, it's not about that. I disrespected you without even thinking, and I'm sorry." Leonard studied him for a moment, then said gently, "Apology accepted. But don't let it stop there. If a lesson doesn't change the way you move forward, it's just words." Trevor nodded, eyes down. "I'll remember that." Leonard smiled faintly. "Good. Then maybe this flight won't just take you to Seattle. Maybe it'll take you somewhere better." Trevor exhaled, a quiet laugh breaking through his guilt. "You really do talk like a man who owns an airline." Leonard chuckled softly. "Owning a company's easy. Building people, that's the real work." Trevor nodded, humbled. For the first time in a long while, he felt quiet inside. Not defeated, just grounded. But as the plane began its descent, Trevor still had one more decision to make. Whether to leave that moment behind or carry it forward into who he'd become next. When the plane touched down in Seattle, the cabin filled with the familiar shuffle of seatbelts clicking and passengers reaching for their bags. The flight attendants thanked everyone for flying, their smiles returning as the tension melted into normalcy. Leonard stood slowly, steady on his feet, and reached for his worn leather briefcase. Trevor stood too, just behind him, unsure if he should say anything more. But before he could overthink it, Leonard turned slightly and spoke first. "Mr. Miles," he said in that calm, steady tone, "you remind me a little of myself when I was younger. Full of ambition, short on patience." Trevor managed a small smile. "Guess I still have some growing up to do." Leonard nodded. "We all do." "Just remember, son, there's a difference between having a seat and earning one." The words landed softly, but deeply. Trevor extended his hand. "Thank you, sir." For being patient with me, Leonard shook it firmly. Patience is just time with kindness attached. Learn to give both, and you'll never lose. Carla came by once more, her eyes bright. "Mr. Claiborne, it was an honor having you on board. And thank you for the reminder that kindness still matters." Leonard smiled warmly. "You're very welcome, my dear. Keep treating people the way you do. It makes more difference than you think." As passengers began to exit, Trevor waited until the aisle cleared. He wanted to let Leonard go first. A small gesture, but one that carried the weight of respect. Leonard gave a quiet nod of acknowledgement and stepped forward. When they reached the gate, a few crew members gathered, greeting Leonard with handshakes and grateful smiles. Trevor watched from a distance as the old man spoke to them, humble, genuine, never needing attention. It hit him then, hard and clear. Power isn't in how loud you are or how much you own. It's in how you treat the people around you when nobody's watching. As Trevor walked out of the terminal, he didn't look at his phone. He didn't rush for a ride. He just stood still for a moment, breathing, thinking. The world felt a little different, quieter, fairer, maybe even kinder. He knew he couldn't undo his mistake, but he could choose how to move forward. And maybe that was enough for now. Later that night, he opened his laptop to write something for his company's website. Instead of his usual flashy quotes, he typed, "Respect costs nothing, but it buys you everything that matters." And for once, he meant every word, because the truth is, you never know who you're sitting next to, or what battles they've already fought just to sit there. So before you speak down to someone, pause, show respect, listen. The seat you think you deserve might belong to someone who built the whole plane. If this story moved you, share it with someone who needs a reminder that kindness isn't weakness. It's strength in its truest form. And next time you travel, remember, it costs nothing to show respect, but it can change everything.